The airport was buzzing with excitement, families laughing, children pulling their suitcases, announcements echoing in the air. I held my passport tight, smiling at the thought that I had spent my entire savings, $35,000, to give my family the dream trip to Europe. But as I reached for my boarding pass, my sister Halima turned, her voice cold. "I forgot your ticket, Keone. Go home." For a moment, my heart stopped. Everyone stared. Was this really happening? Or had they planned it all along? Keone had always been the quiet strength of her family. While others laughed and lived freely, she carried the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She woke up early every morning, worked long shifts at a small cafe, and in the evenings she cleaned offices just to save a little more. Every coin she tucked away had a dream behind it, not for herself but for her family. For years she said no to new clothes, no to outings with friends, even skipped meals sometimes, because she had one goal in her heart. She wanted to give her family something they would never forget, a trip to Europe. She imagined the joy on their faces when they would see new places, eat delicious food, and take pictures together. She believed that this gift would not only bring happiness, but also heal the cracks in their family bonds. Her parents often favored her sister Halima, making Keone feel invisible, but she kept her pain inside. She thought maybe, just maybe, if she gave them this once-in-a-lifetime surprise, they would finally see her love. The day she finally had enough money, she cried tears of relief. $35,000 of her hard work and sacrifice were now ready to give her family the dream she had carried for so long. She planned everything carefully, flights, hotels, tours, even little gifts to make everyone comfortable. When she handed them the news, their eyes widened in shock. Some clapped, some gasped, and for the first time, she saw a glimpse of joy she had always longed for. In her heart, she whispered that this was the start of something new. She thought the walls between them would fall, and maybe they would look at her not as the forgotten daughter, but as the one who truly held them together. She didn't care about the long hours, the sleepless nights, or the exhaustion her body carried. All she cared about was seeing her family smile, and knowing that she had done something big for them. For Keone, this wasn't just a trip. It was love, sacrifice, and hope wrapped into one journey. She believed it was the chance to finally bring her family close again, and she was ready to give them everything she had to make it happen. Even after all the sacrifices Keone made, nothing seemed to change the way her parents treated her. In their eyes, Halima could do no wrong. If Halima cooked a simple meal, they praised her endlessly, calling her thoughtful and caring. But when Keone came home after working long hours and still managed to prepare dinner, they brushed it off as nothing special, almost as if it was expected from her. At family gatherings, their father proudly introduced Halima as the bright, successful daughter, while Keone was barely mentioned. Those moments cut deep, but she swallowed her pain, forcing a smile and keeping quiet. When visitors came, her mother would show Halima's pictures first, talking about her beauty, her style, and how everyone admired her. But when it came to Keone, they only spoke of her struggles, almost making her sound like the less important one. Halima was always dressed in the best clothes, gifted by their parents without hesitation, while Keone wore the same old dresses she had bought with her own hard-earned money. The contrast was clear, and the favoritism was undeniable. Yet, Keone never confronted them. She told herself that love was patient, and that one day they would see her heart. She often replayed moments in her head, times when she had done something good but received no acknowledgement. Like the day she stayed up all night helping her younger brother with schoolwork, only to hear her parents later thanking Halima for keeping the house peaceful. Or the time Keone paid for new curtains to make the living room brighter, and their mother assumed Halima had chosen and paid for them. These little things built up over the years, creating invisible scars that no one could see. Still, Keone never let bitterness take over. She believed that the trip she had planned would finally shift everything. She hoped her parents would realize that while Halima was always lifted on a pedestal, it was her, Keone, who had sacrificed her youth, her comfort, and her own dreams just to give the family happiness. In her heart, she imagined the trip bringing laughter, bonding, and maybe a moment when her parents would look at her with pride. She prayed silently that this journey would be the turning point, the moment when her family would finally treat her with the same warmth they always gave Halima. Keone's love remained steady, even under the weight of unfairness. She carried her hope like a flame, fragile but alive, trusting that the gift she was about to give would open their eyes and heal the unequal bonds that had hurt her for so long. The day of the trip finally arrived, and Keone's heart raced with excitement. She had imagined this moment for years, the whole family traveling together, smiling, united at last. At the airport, she carried her suitcase with pride, knowing every detail had been planned by her hard work. She watched her siblings laughing, her parents chatting happily, and Halima showing off their matching outfits for the pictures she planned to take. For a moment, Keone felt all the long nights and sacrifices were worth it. She believed this was the day her family would finally see her love clearly. When the announcement came for boarding, everyone lined up, holding their passports and tickets. Keone reached out her hand, expecting Halima, who had collected all the documents earlier, to pass hers. But instead Halima turned, a smirk playing on her lips, and said coldly, "I forgot your ticket, Keone. Go home." The words cut through the air like a blade. Keone froze, her mouth opening but no sound coming out. She thought it must be a mistake, a cruel joke, something that would be cleared up in seconds. But Halima simply shrugged, holding the rest of the family's tickets tightly in her hand. Keone looked at her parents, desperate for them to defend her, to say something, anything. But they lowered their eyes, avoiding her gaze. Her mother adjusted her scarf, pretending to be busy. Her father sighed softly, but not a single word of protest left his lips. It was as if they had silently agreed to accept Halima's decision. The people standing nearby noticed the scene, their whispers filling the air, but no one stepped forward. Keone's chest tightened, and her hands shook as she clutched her passport. Her family began to move forward, walking toward the gate as though nothing had happened. Halima led the way, confident and unbothered, while the others followed quietly. Keone stood rooted to the spot, unable to process what was unfolding before her eyes. The family she had given everything to, the trip she had spent years planning, the dream she thought would bring them close. It was all slipping away in a single moment. Tears blurred her vision, but she couldn't move, couldn't speak. She felt abandoned, betrayed, and invisible all at once. Watching their backs as they disappeared toward the gate, a heavy silence wrapped around her. The $35,000, the sleepless nights, the hope of healing, it all felt like ashes in her hands. And in that cold airport hall, surrounded by strangers, Keone realized she had been left behind not just from the trip, but from the family she thought she belonged to. People around could not believe what had just happened. Some gasped softly, some shook their heads, and others stared at Keone with pity in their eyes. She stood frozen, clutching her small bag, unable to move. Her family had walked away without looking back, leaving her alone in the middle of the busy airport. The moment felt unreal, like a nightmare she could not wake up from. A security guard, noticing her pale face and trembling hands, walked over gently. He asked if she was all right, but Keone could not find her voice. Her lips trembled, and tears began to fall before she could stop them. The guard guided her slowly to the waiting area, speaking kindly, but his kindness only made her pain sharper. Keone sat down on a hard bench, her body shaking with quiet sobs. She buried her face in her hands, trying to hide her tears from the strangers still staring at her. The people who had once clapped for her surprise gift, who had smiled when she announced the trip, had now left her behind like she was nothing. She felt stripped of her dignity, used for her money and effort, and then thrown away when her purpose was served. Every memory of the years she worked, every night she skipped meals just to save a little more, came rushing back. She thought about the extra shifts she took at the cafe, the loneliness she felt walking home late at night, and the sacrifices she made for a dream that had ended in betrayal. She whispered to herself, "Why me? What did I do wrong?" But no answer came. Her tears blurred her vision, and she wiped them with the back of her hand, feeling both ashamed and broken. Around her, strangers murmured, some shaking their heads at the cruelty they had just witnessed. But none of their sympathy could fill the hollow space in her chest. The family she trusted most had left her behind without hesitation. The reality sank deeper with each passing second. Her savings, $35,000, were gone. The trip she planned so carefully was gone. And the family she had loved, trusted, and sacrificed everything for, had walked away without caring what would happen to her. Sitting alone in that crowded airport, Keone felt smaller than she had ever felt before. Her body was there, but her heart was shattered. What hurt the most was not just losing the money, but realizing that she had never truly belonged in her own family's love. Keone sat alone in the waiting area, her cheeks still wet from crying. She tried to hold herself together, wiping her face with the corner of her sleeve, but her heart felt heavier than ever. Just when she thought no one cared, a gentle voice broke through her silence. A woman, dressed neatly with a suitcase beside her, had been watching from across the room. She walked over and sat near Keone, her eyes soft with concern. "Are you all right, my dear?" she asked quietly. Keone shook her head, unable to speak, afraid her voice would crack under the weight of her pain. The woman didn't push her but offered a small tissue and waited patiently. Something in her calmness made Keone feel safe enough to whisper what had happened. With broken words, she explained how she had paid for the entire family trip, how she worked herself to exhaustion for years, and how her sister had just told her to go home because her ticket was forgotten. The stranger's eyes widened in disbelief, and her face hardened with anger at such cruelty. She placed her hand gently on Keone's shoulder and said firmly, "What they did to you is not only unfair, it is heartless. People who treat others this way never escape the weight of their actions." Keone listened, her chest tightening, but there was comfort in those words. For the first time since the betrayal, someone believed her pain and called it wrong. The stranger leaned closer, speaking with a confidence that felt unshakable. "Do not think this is the end of your story. Life has a way of turning things around. And trust me, no one can push you down forever." Keone didn't know who this woman was, but her words felt like a light in the middle of darkness. She felt warmth in her heart that had been cold minutes ago. She nodded slowly, her tears still falling, but this time they carried a touch of relief. The stranger gave her a reassuring smile and promised that better days were ahead. What Keone did not realize in that moment was that this woman was more than just a kind traveler. She was someone with powerful connections, someone who could open doors Keone had never dreamed of. This unexpected meeting was the first ray of hope in what felt like a world of despair. While Keone sat at home nursing her pain, Halima was busy filling the internet with carefully chosen pictures from Europe. She posed in front of tall buildings, smiled widely in luxury hotels, and uploaded videos of the family laughing at restaurants. Each post was full of joy, but not once was Keone mentioned. It was as if she had never been part of the trip, as if her sacrifice of $35,000 had vanished into thin air. Friends and relatives commented under the pictures with excitement, praising Halima for her generosity, and calling the family blessed. Keone scrolled through these posts quietly, her chest aching. The very trip she had given them had now become Halima's crown of glory. The betrayal cut deeper than she expected. Every picture felt like another stab to her heart. She remembered how she had imagined standing beside them in those very places, smiling together, finally feeling included. Instead, she was sitting in her small room, forgotten, while the world praised her sister. What hurt most was seeing her parents in the photos, smiling proudly with Halima, as if she was the one who had worked tirelessly to give them this dream. They held her hand in pictures, hugged her tightly, and even tagged her as the pillar of the family. Keone could not understand how they had erased her so easily, how they could enjoy the fruits of her sacrifice while pretending she never existed. At night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her phone glowing. Beside her, each new post from Halima gathered hundreds of likes and dozens of comments, while her name was never once mentioned. Her relatives messaged Halima, telling her how wonderful she was, asking for travel tips, and calling her the star of the family. Keone wanted to scream, to tell the world the truth, but she swallowed her pain in silence. For Keone, it was not about the money anymore. The money was gone. But what hurt more was that her family had erased her from their story. They had taken her sacrifice, turned it into Halima's pride, and left her in the shadows. She had thought the trip would heal their broken bonds, but now it had shown her how deep the wounds truly were. Watching them enjoy themselves without even a thought of her, Keone felt more alone than ever, realizing her place in the family was nothing more than invisible. Several days passed, and Keone was still trying to gather the broken pieces of her heart. She spent her evenings staring at the pictures Halima continued to post, each one more painful than the last. Her room felt smaller than ever, filled with silence that reminded her she had been left behind. She thought life had closed every door for her. and she wondered how she would ever recover from both the loss of her money and the betrayal of her family. Just when she was sinking deeper into her sadness, her phone rang. The number was unknown, and for a moment she almost ignored it. Something inside urged her to answer, and she picked up hesitantly. On the other end, a calm professional voice introduced themselves as a representative of an international cultural exchange agency. They explained that they were searching for someone reliable, hardworking, and trustworthy to represent their program abroad. Confused, Keone asked how they had found her. The caller smiled through their voice and said, "You were recommended by someone who believes in you. The woman you met at the airport spoke highly of your character and your story." Keone's heart skipped. She remembered the kind stranger who had comforted her on the worst day of her life. She had not even known the woman's full name. Yet she had carried her pain and turned it into something meaningful. Keone could hardly believe what she was hearing. The agency explained that the program would cover all her expenses and provide her with opportunities to learn, network, and even grow professionally. They spoke about travel, leadership training, and connections with people from all over the world. As the words sank in, Keone felt tears welling in her eyes, but these were not tears of pain this time. They were tears of hope. It felt unreal that after everything she had lost, life was offering her a chance she had never imagined. She nodded as the caller explained the next steps, her hand trembling as she jotted down details. When the call ended, Keone sat in stunned silence. Just days ago, she had been humiliated in front of strangers, left alone by the very people she loved most. Now, because of one act of kindness from a stranger, a new door had opened. She realized life was not over, and maybe her story was only beginning to turn. What she thought was the end had now become the first step into a future she had never dared to dream. Keone accepted the offer with a heart full of nervous excitement. For the first time, she was not spending money to please others or sacrificing her happiness to be accepted. This opportunity was for her, and her alone. Within weeks, all the arrangements were completed, and soon she was boarding a plane, her ticket fully paid for by the program. As the flight lifted into the sky, she felt a weight fall off her shoulders. The trip her family had denied her was now replaced with something even greater, a chance to grow, to learn, and to finally live for herself. When she arrived abroad, everything felt new and full of promise. The program introduced her to people from different countries, all with unique stories and talents. For the first time, she felt seen and respected. Her kindness, her discipline, and her hard work shone through in every activity she joined. She made friends who admired her resilience, people who supported her instead of ignoring her. Each day, she gained confidence, and slowly the wounds her family left began to heal. Opportunities started opening one after another. She was invited to speak at small gatherings about her journey, and people listened with genuine interest. Some were touched by her strength, others inspired by her sacrifices. Business leaders noticed her too. They offered her chances to learn skills, join projects, and even take part in partnerships. What she had once dreamed of giving her family, she was now building for herself, brick by brick. Months passed, and Keone grew into someone her old self would hardly recognize. She was no longer the quiet girl hiding in the shadows of favoritism. She was a woman who stood tall, independent, and capable. Her name started to appear in program newsletters, and soon she was receiving invitations to bigger events. Recognition came naturally because of her honesty and work ethic. She began to see a life that was not just about survival but about thriving. In her quiet moments, she thought about her family. She remembered the betrayal at the airport, the humiliation, and the tears. Yet instead of feeling only pain, she now felt strength. Their rejection had pushed her onto a path she would never have chosen on her own. And though it hurt, she realized she was finally free. The life they tried to keep her away from was the very life that had lifted her higher than they ever imagined. Months later, the dream trip that Halima had proudly displayed online began to crumble. At first, the family enjoyed the luxury hotels, fine meals, and endless sightseeing, but their spending was careless. They assumed money would last forever, but soon their funds started to dry up. The hotels that once welcomed them now demanded payments they could no longer make. The expensive restaurants turned them away when the bills piled too high. Even the tours and activities they had planned became impossible without enough money. What was once a show of joy and pride slowly turned into stress and arguments. Halima tried to keep posting pictures to maintain the image of a perfect vacation, but behind the camera, chaos grew. As their situation worsened, the reality became clear. They had no financial backup and no plan. Their credit cards failed, and their savings were gone. The same family that had walked confidently through the airport leaving Keone behind was now stuck in a foreign land, facing embarrassment and fear. They argued daily, blaming one another for not managing the money wisely. Halima, who had taken all the praise for organizing the trip, now carried the shame of being unable to fix the disaster. Meanwhile, back home, Keone's life was moving in a completely different direction. She had traveled through the cultural exchange program, gaining not only experience but also respect and admiration. People knew her name, and opportunities surrounded her. She was meeting leaders, learning new skills, and building connections that opened doors she had never dreamed of. Slowly, she built a reputation as a young woman of strength and character. Articles featured her story, organizations invited her to speak, and she began to inspire others who had faced similar struggles. When the family finally returned home, tired and disappointed, they were met with news they did not expect. Everywhere they turned, people were talking about Keone. Neighbors spoke of her success, the community admired her growth, and even distant relatives who once ignored her now praised her achievements. The same daughter they had dismissed, the same sister they had humiliated, had risen higher than any of them could have imagined. Halima and the family were forced to watch as Keone thrived. They saw her stepping into rooms they could never enter, gaining respect they could never command. The tables had truly turned. The family who once treated her as invisible now stood in her shadow, realizing too late that the one they had cast aside had become the brightest light of them all. The day of the family gathering arrived, and the house was full of chatter. Relatives who hadn't seen each other in months exchanged stories, while Halima moved around, trying to control the attention as always. She straightened her dress, lifted her chin and prepared to speak, hoping to once again make herself the center of the room. But before she could begin, Keone stood up. She wasn't dressed in anything flashy, but her presence carried a quiet strength that made people stop talking and listen. Keone's eyes moved calmly across the room, landing on Halima. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. With steady words, she said, "You told me to go home, and I did. But I built a home so strong, you can never lock me out again." Her voice was calm, yet every word struck deep, carrying weight far heavier than anger ever could. The room grew still. Forks paused midair, conversations ended halfway, and everyone turned to Keone with wide eyes. For the first time, Halima had no comeback. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The confidence she always wore like a crown slipped away, leaving her exposed in front of everyone. Keone didn't gloat. She didn't smile in victory. She simply sat back down, her point made. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was filled with realization. Relatives who once believed Halima's lies now saw the truth with their own eyes. Keone was no longer the girl they could dismiss, no longer the one they could push aside. Halima shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her pride shrinking under the weight of the moment. The same relatives who once clapped for her stories now avoided her gaze, ashamed of how they had treated Keone. Keone, on the other hand, sat with quiet dignity. She didn't need their validation anymore. Her life spoke louder than any praise or apology could. She had built a future that was hers alone, one that nobody could take away. The evening carried on, but the atmosphere had changed. People whispered to one another, not about Halima's trips or her posts online, but about Keone's strength, her resilience, her calm victory. And though she said no more, everyone in that room understood. The tables had turned forever. Halima could no longer write Keone out of the story, because Keone had written her own chapter, one stronger, brighter, and unshakable.